This is a production of Cornell University.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming to the 2023 Cornell Cooperative Extension in Service Climate Symposium. My name is Jenna Walczak, and I am an Ag Climate Resiliency Specialist on the Harvest New York team. I just wanted to say, as we get started here, feel free to grab food and continue eating.
And I'm TeJay Chess. I'm the Natural Resources Educator and Climate Stewards Coordinator at Cornell Cooperative Extension in Monroe County.
Thank you all for being here today at the end of In Service. We know it's likely been a long week. I just wanted to start by saying there is a history of climate work at CCE, New York Sea Grant, and at Cornell. This is not the first climate symposium. There have been climate events at In Service and related training since the 1990s. In addition to these past events, there is a flurry of work happening across the state, in counties, research groups at Cornell, field work by regional teams, and program work teams, all taking on different pieces of the climate change challenge. The motivation for this particular event is twofold. First, CCE educators have expressed interest in more opportunities to engage on climate topics. Second, CCE leadership has recognized this interest and as a result, reached out asking for this type of event. And here we are. Well, not exactly. The road to planning this event began in May. And we would like to thank the Climate Symposium Planning Committee, who you can see on the slide here, for all of the hard work and effort that they have put into planning today. Yeah, so just a round of applause.
So specifically, why are we here today? What's our goal? This event is an opportunity for CCE educators, Cornell faculty, researchers, and New York stakeholders involved in climate, the environment, energy, justice, forestry, water, ag, the list goes on, to continue to connect and collaboratively present shared work. So if you're thinking, wow, that sounds like a lot, you would be right. But this speaks to one of our challenges of both climate change and planning an event like this. There are impacts on every aspect of our society, lives, and work. Framing this in a more action-oriented way, there are ways that each of us can incorporate climate work into our jobs at our local extensions.
As Cornell Cooperative Extension, our mandate is to put knowledge to work in pursuit of economic vitality, ecological sustainability, and social well-being. We hope the symposium will provide CCE educators on the ground with the information and resources they need to educate stakeholders about practices for mitigating and adapting to climate change as relates to this mandate. We have envisioned this event as a way to bring awareness to the climate work that is already happening, as well as a starting point for future collaborations and events. It's important to celebrate current initiatives, but we need to continue to mobilize to bring about real change.
So we're going to be showcasing current climate work with the hope that the following projects will provide inspirational examples and a framework for expanding on climate action in your role and community. We have many experts in many climate-related topics across CCE and Cornell. We also want to acknowledge that there are important aspects of climate work that are not represented today in these presentations, purely due to time constraints. The Climate Symposium is about getting to know one another and the resources that we already have available to us. So we hope that you will walk away from today feeling excited and with at least one idea of a colleague that you can connect with after the event, or a project that you would like to learn more about or implement.
And with that, I would like to introduce Jenifer Wightman. Jenifer Wightman is a Senior Extension Associate in Soil and Crop Sciences. She became committed to climate in an environmental toxicology course led by Professor Murray McBride, Emeritus, when she was a graduate student at Cornell, and it completely changed her trajectory. She specializes in greenhouse gas analysis for meaningful reduction in emissions. She is co-lead of the Greenhouse Gas Accounting and Mitigation Potential by Agriculture for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Inventory. She aspires to design solutions that employ the highest and best use of our resources equitably. And with that, Jenna, the stage is yours.
It's very fast. So I just want to point out that we have 3 new extension agents working on climate who were so pivotal for today. And let's celebrate the growth of the next generation of extension of Jenna, TeJay, and Savannah. Like, great organization with it. So, yes, we can change climate. So let's change the climate. New York State is committed to mitigating its emissions. That is clear. We have a legal mandate, net neutral by 2050. We have funding for landowners and homeowners and farmers to implement a various suite of activities. We have the technology and the methods, and we have a community of super neat people like everybody in this room right here. Let's make it happen. I struggle with the term climate change. To me, this phrase is very passive acceptance of a phenomena. There's extreme weather. There's increased insurance premiums. There's food insecurity and habitat and species loss. This is not a passive activity. We ourselves are constantly and actively changing things. You run out of cookies, you bake some more. The compost bucket is full, you take it out. You have a leak in the roof, you put a bucket under it, you look at your finances, you save, and then you call somebody, right? This is how we've always done everything. And why have we been changing? We have been changing endlessly. This painting in New York State is from 1826, and you'll see in the foreground 2 redbacks. Those 2 tiny humans are fighting for those massive natural resources. In this painting from 1836, you can see on the right-hand side, active agriculture coming on. Here you see someone prospecting. Here someone is driving home the house. And this painting, which is technically from Pennsylvania, in 1856, let's note the year, 1856. You'll see a city in the background, smoke, you'll see a train, and in the foreground, you'll see all those trees because we were cutting down those trees. So let's look at the context of New York. New York has always been forested until recently. And then in the 1850s-ish, 1875, we were the most deforested we've ever been. Let's look at what that looks like in terms of our energy consumption, right? So the painting was 1856. This little divot is at 1875, right? The lowest point of our forest. This is the US energy consumption, and you'll see that wood peaks around 1850, 1860, something like that. And then, of course, we discovered all kinds of fuels in New York State and elsewhere. And all of that blue is the source of our problem. We are changing things. We are pulling up historic cultures, historic ecosystems, historic communities of trees and plants and bugs and creatures that have been stored deep, deep, deep within the earth in their own generations of carbon sequestration. And this is the source of our problem. We're simply pulling it up. And frankly, if you were stored carbon way down there, wouldn't you want to be liberated and test out the atmosphere? I mean, you can't really hold it against them. The point here is that the climate has changed, and we have actively changed it. But as evidenced in this room, we are a reflective and thinking species. We are tracking our impact. We have research, we have policy, we have funding, and we have people. And this isn't the first time. We used to take our waste in New York City and collect our night soil with a horse and carriage and go like east-west on 14th Street and dump it in the East River, and then go west-east on 15th Street and dump it in the Hudson River. And so what happens? We have a cholera outbreak. And notably, New York State made its first sewage treatment plant in Flushing, New York. I love that. We also used to have evidence of fires on our waterways. And what did we do? We came up with the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. Interestingly, climate was on that agenda, but it didn't happen. But the point is, we have addressed this issue too. We had whole campaigns for electrification. These are posters from 1937 in order to bring radio or internet, to bring light or LEDs, right? To bring fresh water and be able to do our laundry, to heat and cool our homes and our spaces, and to help farmers. Electrification was in 1937. All we're doing is re-upping that agenda. So here's a personal story. I grew up in rural New Hampshire, and my grandma lived in New Jersey. It took us 8 hours, and now it takes about 4.5, but back then it took us 8 hours as we navigated those roads. And when I was about 10, you know, the chore or the way to distract me in the car without an iPad was to make me manage the road. And the most exciting thing about these maps was the legend. Because when it was a hatched line, it was under construction, when it was the color, and when it was proposed. And I learned that lesson at about 10, that we build things, that we make things, that there is something coming. And that is what we are tasked with today. Past generations did these things for us. What will we do for those that come after us? We change things, so let's really change things. So how do we do it? Well, we have an overarching mandate. We have methods and mechanisms. We have funding, we have each other, and we continue to seek. We are ready. And that's where we introduce the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA, or the Climate Act. Here is the link to find that actual legislation and read it. The high-level content says we need a 40% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030 and an 85% reduction by 2050 and net neutral by 2050. That means the hard-to-decarbonize fuels like jet fuel or a burping cow that we can't quite get to stop. We have to deal with growing more trees to sequester that remaining 15%. And when we do that, it can't result in more emissions from other sectors. We can't harm other parts of our ecosystems as we address these climate emissions. We must also do it with equity and social justice in mind. And this is a report that Julie Suarez was part of, the Diversity and Racial Equity Working Group report released in 2021, which was quite eye-opening for me. And this was from Ag and Markets. This is how we are delivering on what the CLCPA is asking of us. It also mandates that we must minimize costs and maximize an early action. So what is a reasonable cost? Well, DEC set out to figure out what the social cost of carbon is. And their most recent estimates are about $130 per metric ton today. What does that mean? Anything we can do to reduce 1 ton of greenhouse gases for less than $130 saves future generations $130 in damages. Say nothing of the emotional impact of those damages. So this is also being equitable to future generations. And of course, if you look at 2050, it goes up to $180. But here we have sort of a beginning of a reasonable metric of what is affordable. So in summary, a 40% reduction by 2030, 85 by 2050. We have a scoping plan. It's revised every 5 years. So if you don't like something, get on board and start talking about it. The mitigation must be low cost. It must be equitable. It must not cause other pollution, and it must be measurable, real, permanent, and verifiable. 2024 is when the regulation goes into effect for all sectors. And my apartment building in New York City, for example, I have a B energy grade. If I had a D or F, and there are plenty of buildings that have Ds and Fs, their first fine starts in 2025. They can either invest on reducing their energy footprint or get fined. And so this is how, for example, buildings in New York City are meeting this goal alongside all of our other efforts. And is New York a wacky, like weird state? No. If you want to see other states who are doing other great things, look at the Climate Alliance and you'll find those initiatives. Okay, so we have a mandate. How do we actually reduce our emissions? Well, we look at the baseline. And this is our baseline. This is what the historic New York State emissions are from 1990 to 2020, right? And we need to think about 1990 because the emissions reductions is based on this 1990 number. I don't know if you can see the arrow. Okay, are you excited for the next slide? Yeah. Okay. We emitted 345 million metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2020, but that was 15% lower than 1990. Look at that. We've already done 15% of our 2030 goal. Hooray! Did you even feel that? Some cookies in the oven. Okay, energy is the majority of our problem. If there's one thing we all have to take away from this, is energy is our problem. And that doesn't mean we have to go broke or we have to get all cold. No, there's tons of solutions, right? But energy is our problem. So don't let people tell you agriculture is the problem or cows are the problem. Energy, fossil fuels are our problem, and we've got great alternatives. Waste is also meaningful. We have to attend to it. Agriculture is 6% of our emissions, and forest is our poster child success story. We're so lucky we have this forest bank. So where do we need to go? Here's that same thing, the same diagnostics of our past and present, of where 40% and where 85% is. I guesstimated those lines, so don't be too literal. How do we get there? We have a 445-page scoping plan. You can check it out. You don't have to read all of it. You just need to read your section. And here's our emissions by sector. This is one gigantic pie. And most of those emissions are coming from transportation and buildings. You'll notice that the only thing for electricity is natural gas, because 30% of our electricity is already made from renewable resources. So of course it's not on this side of the problem, right? It's been disappeared, but that doesn't mean it hasn't appeared fiercely. And electricity is now equal with our waste emissions, which is kind of interesting. And you see agriculture is in the pink and it's 6%. So the summary of the inventory. Most emissions are from buildings and transportation. Agriculture is small. Waste emissions are similar to fossil-based electric emissions. Forests are a major sink. We are already 15% below 1990 levels, so let's rally for the next 25 to reach our 40% goal by 2030. Can we do that? Okay, so this is where my work with Peter Woodbury comes in, and we're going to focus in on the ag sector. Can the ag sector reduce its emissions 40%? So this is our inventory, right? And you can see that actually in agriculture, we have more emissions in 2020, unlike the state at large, than we did in 1990. These are emissions broken down by type of source within agriculture. And these are estimates on the right-hand side of ways in which we could reduce those emissions. With available technologies today, we think we can reduce our emissions roughly 50%. This isn't, we don't have to wait, right? It's going to take work. I don't mean to say that this is simple. Reseeding, which is one of the big things, reseeding 1.7 million acres of forest land with new trees. That's no small task, right? I'm not saying this is easy, but this is doable. This is baking cookies or something. We can do it. What about Cornell's campus? Cornell has a goal to reduce its being net neutral by 2035. They're almost at 50% reduction of their total emissions. They, us, we, this, right? Which is amazing. Like, these things are doable. Plus, do we have the resources to help landowners and homeowners and farmers make change? There are more than $50 million in the next year alone to help this happen. We need to mobilize ourselves. In summary, the CLCPA is simply an umbrella policy, a mandate to inspire our action. There are loads of other policies built or in progress of being built to help move the change forward. And let's remember that the proportion of the US workforce in farming in 1850 was 64%. Today, it's only 10%. Yet everything, urban or rural, that we do to reduce greenhouse gases helps current and future farmers supply our food chain. It also helps current and future citizens have less damage to their homes and shared infrastructure. Everything we're talking about today will directly and indirectly benefit all citizens. We are a society born from the land on which we stand. We are in this together. And I just want us to read the cooperative extension passage of the Smith-Lever Act in 1914. Notably, I got this from Mann Library. I love that library. Those librarians are amazing. Cooperative agriculture extension work shall consist of the development of practical applications of research knowledge, instruction and practical demonstration of existing or improved practices or technologies in agriculture, uses of solar energy with respect to agriculture, 1914. Home economics, we're covering that today, and rural energy. We have 61% forest land, 20% agriculture, 13% idle or underutilized land. How many extension agents focus on those idle landowners? We focus on forestry and agriculture. We need to think about those 4 million acres and how we can activate them. We have water bodies and coastlines, rural and urban cities. How will we citizens equitably manage these finite resources for the highest and best use for society? What is so very great about extension is we have the opportunity to make a real difference in each other's lives, now and in the future. The point, we have the mandate and the goals. We have the baseline and the technologies. We have the funds, and we have this tremendous people power. So which piece of this pie are you going to start slicing up? Juicy. I want to end with these two pieces of art. A piece of art from 1970 by Robert Indiana, and this new piece that's up right now called In Every Language There Is Land, En Cada Lengua Hay Una Tierra, by Nicholas Galilee. We must love our land. Let's have a more loving relationship with each other and our land. Let's work together. Let's have faith in our creative spirit. Let's maintain empiric vigor for real mitigation. Let's celebrate our successes, and let's have gratitude for every person and policy that helps us move forward, made by each other for each other on this singular earth. So let's have a round of applause for this whole room and all of your efforts that you have brought here today and all of your inspiration for today, because we are going to do this. So it's with great pleasure and an honor to welcome our keynote speaker, Julie Suarez. Julie, I've chosen to visualize your bio so that we can see all the projects you've worked on. She serves as the Associate Dean for Land Grant Affairs for Cornell University's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. Her role is to facilitate partnerships between the land grant mission of the college to New York State communities and policymakers. While at CALS, she's played a leading role in establishing and expanding programs designed to assist New York State farms and food systems. From the creation of innovation programs like Grow New York on the screen, and the Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture, to the expansion of Pro-Dairy, New York State Integrated Pest Management, and the establishment of Cornell Small Farms, veteran and equity-focused outreach programs, and the Cornell Soil Health and Resiliency Program. She serves on the Governor's Council on Food and Hunger Policy. She served on the Agriculture and Forestry Committee of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the Industrial Hemp Task Force for the Department of Ag and Markets, the Clean Energy for Agriculture Committee for NYSERDA, and the Working Group for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Agriculture, led by Commissioner Ball. Most recently, she catalyzed a massive effort, which we just heard great news about today, with connecting state agencies with academic partners to produce a $60 million USDA Climate Connects grant for implementing projects on the ground for New York State landowners. Looking forward, she is also working to leverage Cornell CALS and SUNY ESF to help transform our upstate areas into a vibrant bioeconomy, focused on food, farming, and forestry to help New York State meet our net zero climate goals. And she's most proud of her 2 science-inclined daughters, a flock of backyard chickens, and happily resides in Skodak with her spouse. Please join me in warmly celebrating her efforts past and present on behalf of us all.
Thank you. So Jenny, thank you so much for your kindness, your thoughtfulness, and I'm always in awe of Jenny's brain power. I've had the distinct privilege and honor of working with Jenny and Peter for quite some time now, and every time Jenny opens her mouth, something thoughtful comes out of it. So I just really appreciate you, and by the way, I'm totally humbled. I only told Jenny to say 2 things about me, so that was a little bit embarrassing. Thank you. So really appreciate being here today. Let's see if I can figure this out. You move this down, right? Sorry, technology is not my strong suit. There we go. Thank you. So here we are today, Julie Suarez, Cornell CALS. Obviously, if I can still, what is going on? Sorry. Oh my God. You know, you can do some things, but apparently little things in life defeat me. So at any rate, what is our context today? You'll all be really happy to know I'm going to abridge this speech because Jenny and I didn't coordinate. So you've heard much more thorough talks about a little bit of a quick refresher on our New York State Climate Act and our ag and forestry systems goals. So a little bit of duplication, but not too much. And I'm going to pivot a bit. I'm going to talk to you a few Cornell CALS updates, which I think may be interesting to you. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit about leading on climate, cooperative extension, and I would have to say too, my own personal commitment. Thank you for advancing the slides before it. So what is our greenhouse gas emission scope, right? I wanted to level set this for everybody in this room. So you've seen this chart from Jenny already, so a little bit of duplication. Again, agriculture is 6%. But what's really important is that we also have to think about methane, right? And I see Peter here, and I don't see Lauren, but she's probably here somewhere. And we're really thinking about agriculture's contribution as it pertains to methane as a greenhouse gas in our atmosphere. So from a New York State perspective, 6% of overall greenhouse gas emissions, but 19% of methane emissions. And we all know, thanks to Peter Woodbury's great work, Bob Howard's great work, methane has a huge impact on our environment and on climate change, right? So methane is something that we really need to focus on. Next slide, please. Are you moving at somebody's moves? Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm like, I don't know why I couldn't do that with the mouse. So New York's Climate Act We've already talked about this, CLCPA goals. I think everybody really focuses on 70% renewable energy generation. I want to give a huge shout out to Rich Stedman. For those of you in the room earlier, my solar presentation, Rich paid me to tell me this and duplicate this for you again. Rich wrote probably one of the best pieces of scholarship I've seen from faculty this past year. The rest of the faculty, I'm going to keep my head down underneath this podium for a moment because I see a couple faculty in the room. Rich wrote, along with Roberta Nilsson, a fabulous article on agrivoltaics and rural burden. And I really just wanted to point that out to you so that you take the time to read his work when it talks about how the farm community feels. That concept of rural burden really spoke to me personally. So I want to make sure I shouted that out. Next slide, and I'm not going to talk anymore about CLCPA. I am, however, going to talk about the scoping plan. And this is where Jenny and I inadvertently tag teamed a little bit. So our dean, Dr. Ben Houlton, was actually on the integration analysis for the scoping plan. And here's where I want to shout out, even though I just talked about agriculture's methane emissions, the incredible potential for agriculture to be a key part of the climate solution, right? And that's something we really all need to focus on and internalize. So when I look at the scoping plan, Jenny gave you the link. I'd encourage you to go read it. For those of you who are interested in this area, this is scenario 4. And while I don't know if you can see, can you guys see where I put the arrows in on the clip art? I don't know if you can read the text up there, but I put blue arrows on the slide so that you would see all the many ways that agriculture has an incredible ability to really get us to net zero by 2050. Right? Through methane mitigation, now I can't read it, methane mitigation, through agricultural R&D, through soil carbon sequestration that is permanent and verified, right? So what's beyond cover cropping? How do we do enhanced photosynthesis? Really important work that agriculture has a contribution to. And so I wanted to point out that when we think about your work as you move forward in the agricultural community, agriculture, yes, maybe is not so significant overall for greenhouse gas emissions, highly significant for methane, but overall huge potential to do good in the world. So that helps make your work even more important. Next slide, thank you. So ag and forestry recommendations, Jenny mentioned. I had the distinct privilege of serving on the Climate and Community Leadership Program Ag and Forestry subcommittee. Encourage you all to read that report. Peter Woodbury, Jenny were very involved in it, as were a number of our other faculty members who brought them in for various subcommittees. What are the key areas we're focusing on? Because this is important for you in your work. Importantly, also, it's important for you to know where the funding agencies are going to start investing money into, right? So that we can help the farm community take advantage of some of these incentives. So we're going to promote sustainable forest management. We're going to work on advancing livestock management strategies, enteric fermentation, alternative manure management systems. We'll look to improve soil health, not just for water quality, but again, I mentioned soil carbon storage. Looking at nutrient management, particularly focused on nitrogen reduction, really important to decrease our nitrous oxide emissions. Also looking at agroforestry, getting more value from our woods while we're also planting trees, right? And that photo, for those of you who may have gone to Arnott yesterday, that photo is from Brett Chedsoy's farm on Monday, which was fantastic. I had the opportunity to go visit with him on Monday, and really seeing cows in the woods is just really kind of fun, right? So also another key component of our ag and forestry recommendations, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, is to promote something called a climate-focused bioeconomy. So really important in terms of how do we actually develop a natural resource-based economy that creates products that replace fossil fuels. Oops, I think I figured out how to switch it. No, there we go. Sorry, thank you. Now we've got dueling switches. I figured it out now, so I'm good. No, once we got away from the mouse. So USDA Climate Connects grant, and Jenny mentioned this, so thank you. It really was a great experience, and now we are finally starting to get to the implementation phase. What does this matter? So we were able to secure a $60 million grant from USDA under their Climate Connects program. And the focus is that we're going to figure out how we utilize that money to help get farmers and foresters into a more of a net zero economy. So who's on the team? It's a really broad ranging team. It's the first time in my 10 years at CALS I've helped successfully wrangle DEC, ag and markets, soil and water conservation districts. I could only find Suffolk, so I couldn't find a statewide logo, but I know Emily is here from Suffolk, so you'll appreciate the shout out to Suffolk. But it's the whole statewide CCEs, or soil and water conservation districts. And then our academic partners, of course, are Cornell Cows, SUNY ESF, and Syracuse. You may be wondering why Syracuse, because there's a marketing component to this grant. And there's a really good faculty member at Syracuse who's going to look at how do you make climate smart commodities and make them actually return value. So who's on the team at CALS? And I'm going to shout out Dr. Ichi Liu. How many of you have had the chance to meet Ichi yet? Relatively new on faculty, about a year. Rich has, Art has, okay. Anu, of course. Really encourage you, if you have a chance, to invite Ichi to come talk to one of your seminars coming up. Ichi and I co-presented at a convening back in February with all the national science agencies. And he's just a really incredibly thoughtful person and is really working hard on how do you figure out a system that will help measure, monitor, and research and verify. I always mix up the acronym, mild dyslexia. How do you do the MMVR or the MMRV portion of actually coming up with a way to monetize climate benefits, right? So if you want to look at his website, ecopad.edu is going to get you there. He already has a land-based modeling tool for global carbon stocks. Why is this important? Because as we think about how we're going to pay farmers to do good practices that we want them to do, or foresters, somebody has to figure out how you calculate the value of that greenhouse gas, either avoided, mitigated, or sequestered in our soils. And so by the end of this 5-year grant, Ichi will be taking his tool along with a lot of other CALS faculty expertise that's contributing into this and turning it into a new version of what's called Comet Planner. So super exciting. So theoretically, hopefully at the end, you're a farmer, you're sitting there, you want to sell your carbon credit, you pull up an app on your phone, might not be quite that simple, but let's pretend it's going to be that simple. You pull up an app on your phone and you say, okay, if I do X, Y, Z, I can actually monetize that carbon credit. So that is the overall goal of this really exciting team endeavor. Also want to shout out Anu Rangarajan, who is working to translate climate smart agricultural practices into smaller scale farms, diverse equity, Spanish first farms, as well as really focused on urban environments too. Because how do you take a practice and measure it in an urban garden, which has very, very small land compared to upstate, but is still super meaningful and also confers other climate benefits that we want to see in our cities. We also have Peter and Brett, Peter Smallage and Brett Chedsoy, who are working on the agroforestry component. And I'm super excited about the agroforestry component because, again, when we talk about double cropping, that's one of the really significant ways to return value. We have Peter Woodbury, Jenny Wightman. Jenny, by the way, I have to compliment you. That's the best headshot picture I've seen on the CALS website. It's awesome. You look so relaxed right there. So Peter and Jenny are also on this project working on MMVR and greenhouse gas inventory. Kirsten Reed from Animal Sciences with their Ruafis model. We have Ben Houlton, who's actually, we're taking off his dean hat for a moment and putting his research hat on, and he's working with Creers Family Farms out in Western New York on an enhanced weathering pilot that'll go into the soil carbon sequestration models. Lauren Ray from ProDairy, who will be busily managing methane from a lot of our New York State dairy farms. Lauren's right over there, thank you, along with her colleague, Bob Howard, faculty member in EEB, who will also be part of this grant to help measure and monitor methane emissions from dairy farms. And we also have Zheng Tao, who actually should have been up with Brett and Peter for the agroforestry, who will be helping measure forest carbon sequestration. And all of that comes into Ichi's eventual model. So really important tool that we expect to have. I'd expect that there will be a lot of extension involvement because farmers are going to be really confused, right? It's going to take a while to train people how to use this. So I look forward to really helping the extension community connect with Ichi and all of our colleagues' great work on this. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about super quickly is another really exciting project we're engaged in at the college level, which is called Upstate 2.0, because, you know, Upstate 1.0 didn't sound good, but we figured Upstate 2.0 sounded better. So what is this? NSF, National Sciences Foundation, has a really exciting goal of transforming economies, right? It always makes me chuckle when I hear all, when you read all this wonderful text on grant award announcements, they want you to come up with all these transformative projects. And I'm like, okay. So our goal is to create a transformative engine for bioeconomy. And so they're called the Engines grants. We have a type 1 grant, which is $1 million planning grant. And we have catalyzed a really neat team from Cornell CREA, Center for Regional Economic Advancement. They also help run Grow New York. We have a team from SUNY ESF. Any ESF grads here? ESF is great. I've been working a lot with ESF in the past couple of years, and just really fantastic team. And of course, CALS and Cornell Engineering as well. Jillian Goldfarb and Hadass, because we want to get robots into this developing bioeconomy, right? We have labor challenges, we have all these other technical challenges in our farms and fields. So we want to try to harness our engineering colleagues' robotic strength, right? So the goal of this type 1 planning grant, and it's a 1-year ideation process, is to get us to a type 2, which is like the mother of all big prizes, $160 million of money for faculty members to play around with, right? So all the faculty members in the room were like, ooh, $160 million for R&D. That's exciting, right? But the goal is to really help get us to the R&D that's going to be necessary to support a bioeconomy, one that is inextricably linked to our forests, to our farms, to our food producers, one that is significantly more just and more inclusive, and one that includes and relies on use-inspired research. If you want to learn more about it, I put the website there. And what is the ideation process? So we've been having a lot of really fun road trips. So part of our idea for this NSF grant is to think about net zero dairies, right? So what is the actual research and tools that our farmers and our food manufacturers need to reduce their energy and to actually produce products that we all want to eat 3 times or more a day, but to do so in a net zero fashion, right? So we've been working with Cayuga Milk Ingredients and the 21 farms that surround Cayuga Milk Ingredients to think about milk all the way from the farm to the processing plant. So super exciting concept. Other concepts we're talking about is CEA and protected agriculture. Really important to think about as our climate changes and we need to grow more food in the New York State area and of course the Northeast area as well. What are the types of investments and what scales do we need for growers to truly be successful in CEA and protected agriculture? My robotic friends, my engineering friends are really interested in this concept of a Center for Agricultural Autonomy, harnessing AI, which is, I have not used ChatGPT. I don't know how many of you in the room have used ChatGPT. I know Kyle has. But, how do we get AI to work better for our data and also create really fun robots like Yujan's robot, which you see pictured on there at Agritech, to help farmers eventually harvest, but right now with disease detection, looking at sustainable aviation fuels, bio-based processing materials, right? How do we actually utilize hemp? And of course, we're really focused on doing things better than we have in the past, being inclusive. And so we've had a lot of meetings with our tribal partners on this grant, which has been something that's been deeply inspiring and meaningful to me. And we're talking about how we make sure that we engage with tribal communities so that it's two-way learning. So science-based solutions, I did want to shout out to Yolanda, because I said to Yolanda, what does CCE really want to hear? So I'm putting you on the spot, Yolanda. Yolanda's like, ooh, hopefully I said something good. So shout out to Yolanda who said, you know what, we really want to hear or know at least a little bit more about what faculty are doing. So I took a look at who's coming to this, and I wanted to just shout out faculty to keep an eye on who are working in this area. And I'm not going to go through their research, but I encourage you to keep your eye on them. So methane mitigation, Joe McFadden, enteric fermentation. We will soon have methane chambers on this campus. I say soon because so far it's been like October and then November, and now maybe what, Jason, what's the next estimate? December-ish, January. We will soon have those on our campus to be able to do the science that we need to give farmers real science-based solutions. Corinne Ketterings is doing fabulous work on-farm research with nitrogen emission reduction. Really encourage you to follow her work. For those of you who have farmers who may be interested in doing on-farm trials, please see Jason. There's my commercial for you. Great work that she's doing. Soil carbon sequestration with permanence, right? Cover crops are great. They're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tools, but we need to have ways to store carbon more permanently in our soils. And that's going to be through things like biochar. You see on that slide, one of a mobile pyrolysis unit installed on Doug Young's farm in Spruce Haven with Johannes Lehmann. So we're thinking about biochar, we're thinking about enhanced weathering. Forestry and agroforestry, of course, really want to shout out some of Zheng Tao's work. He's a relatively newer faculty member. Encourage you to get to know him and understand what he's doing in our forest, kind of backpack measurement systems that are going to be really important for our future. Climate resiliency plant breeding, a number of faculty members working in that, but Laura Gunn, if anybody's ever talked to Laura Gunn, amazing work. I can't completely describe it, but she's working on enhanced plant photosynthesis. So how do you change the plant biology to make sure that the plant can actually take carbon more effectively from the atmosphere, grow deeper roots, and store it into our soil? So really neat plant biology work. Greenhouse gas accounting, I've talked about Ichi, Peter and Jenny working in this area. And then of course, we also have to think about biodiversity. I know in the ag world, we don't think about biodiversity as much, but super important work that we need to be thinking of. I've already shouted out Rich, so I'm going to skip over my shout out to you again, Rich, but a lot of people working in agrivoltaics, and that will be very important as we hit to 70%. But now here I'm going to stop with the information overload and say, where do we go from here, right? So I wanted to just share with you some of, and I don't often do this, but so I'm going to take my moment in the spotlight to kind of be a little bit philosophical for a moment, so you'll have to bear with me. But what are our farmers feeling today, right? They're feeling pressures from consolidation and concentration. I'd encourage you to read the USDA seed consolidation report, quite scary for those of you who are worried about consolidation and concentration in the ag input arena. They're concerned with high input costs. Inflation, of course, is coming down now, but it's still at levels that we've not seen. And the thing about prices rising is that they may start to go down, but they never go down to the exact same area where they were before, right? We see incredible disruptions in supply chains and markets. Cheryl is or is not in this room, I don't know, but the farm to school team has been dealing with a lot of talk this whole week on the cardboard shortage, right? Because we're still seeing massive disruptions in our marketplace. We have climate and weather challenges, let alone climate change, right? Our farmers are also dealing with climate adaptation. We see this concept of rural burden and a concept of urban burden, right? We don't always understand each other's. In rural areas, we feel like we've been extracted, and in urban areas, we also feel like we've had a very extractive economy, right? So these pressures are weighing on us. And of course, we have an incredible amount of filter bubbles and a lack of science-based real information. I think the most recent thing I was chatting about with my spouse at the dining room table last night was an actual real question saying that solar energy is actually more harmful to the environment than nuclear. So we have a lot of information out there in the ether that is not accurate, right? We have regulatory constraints, and we have incredible global trade partner shocks, and we have overall uncertainties in the world in which we live today. But a very wise person once said to me, it is human nature to be afraid of change, and it is particularly human to be afraid of the incredibly rapid pace of change that we see in all areas of our lives, from local to global communities, right? So if we recognize that that change and that fear of change is very real, the fear of each other, it kind of fosters so much of we see that's troubling in society today, from disinformation to active strife and a decline of civic engagement. Bet you didn't expect a political scientist to be talking about decline in civic engagement in a climate forum, right? But it matters, right? So where do we go from here? If all of those are factors that are facing the communities in which we serve, where do we go from here? And because I tend to read an awful lot, I would highly recommend this book to you by Lee McIntyre, who's an MIT faculty member. This came out, I think, a year or so ago. I don't entirely recall. I've passed it around to a bunch of my colleagues at this point. I'm not even sure who has it at this moment in time. But I'd really recommend that you read this, because everything that Extension does is a solution to this intractable problem in society today of people's unwillingness to confront change and their fear and the constant misinformation we see, right? So what are the key lessons from this book? Have conversations, not confrontations, right? If you're talking to somebody who really truly doesn't believe in climate change, you are not going to change their opinion if you confront them. Have long-term, non-extractive relationships, super key, right? That's a key issue of what we have in extension. Factual and respectful continued dialogue and engagement. And then piercing the filter bubbles that we all live in, practicing empathy and authentically listening. These are the key lessons from this book and from life in general for how to actually talk to people in your communities about climate change and misinformation and fear, right? So how do we make a difference, right? This is my being a little bit snarky, but I'm going to share with you my own personal philosophy. And I think it's kind of the height of arrogance to put your own picture on a slide set that you're giving, just so you know, I'm acknowledging that. However, I did it because I want to say this is my personal commitment. You may or may not choose to share this, and it's entirely up to you. So how do we make a difference in this world in which we live in? Put science-based solutions first when you're conversing with people. Listen with compassion. Lead with optimism, right? Because that is so important for the world in which we live. And I deal with talking to so many farmers who are very unoptimistic that it is important to always retain your optimism. Be relevant to all of your community. And when I say all, I do mean all of your community, including people who may or may not look like you, right? Super important to be more inclusive. Provide education without judgment or arrogance, right? And always remember, we learn as much as we teach. And so there's my acronym. Everybody ready? SCORE, right? When we think about how you want to be in life, that is certainly my commitment. And so I will just leave you with the thought that it's really important for us all in this room when we're wearing Cornell red shirts to be the change that you wish to see, right? Because we are not going to make a difference in climate unless we model behavior ourselves. So do not ever hit people over the head with climate issues, but look for ways to partner. Reach out to your soil and water conservation districts. Reach out to others, provide science-based and practical advice that effectuates behavioral change. And echoing Jenny's far more inspirational call, I will say we will indeed get there together, and we don't have much more time to waste. So I look forward to the years ahead.
Thank you, Julie, for that thoughtful and inspirational presentation. Dean Ben Houlton wasn't able to make it to today's event, but he did record remarks for everyone here.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the CCE In-Service Climate Symposium. I'm Benjamin Houlton, the Ronald P. Lynch Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And I also happen to be a climate scientist who studies agricultural sustainability. Now we know the climate challenge is here. It's bad, it's getting worse, and we can solve it. But it's going to take collective action and new innovations to support the state through the incredible issues that are in front of us. In New York, we are already witnessing the devastating impacts of growing weather extremes, historic floods, droughts that are localized, rising temperatures and heat waves, and rising seas. This is challenging our farmers and producers, our infrastructure, our natural resources, and of course, our communities. So we need to focus on resilience. Resilience is where adaptation, mitigation, and societal transformation come together in sets of solutions that can bend the carbon curve, bend the warming curve, and promote resilience for food, for people, and for infrastructure. At Cornell, we have launched the 2030 Project, which is dedicated to harnessing the firepower of Cornell's intellectual expertise across all colleges and schools to help support real, ambitious, and practical climate solutions. We're focusing on farms of the future and food of the future, energy of the future, material goods of the future, and of course, societies of the future. These core areas are fundamental to translating research on this campus to the broader world, and will be fundamental to thinking about our land grant mission in New York State. However, the university's reach is greatly diminished without the sheer expertise and localized knowledge of Cornell Cooperative Extension. That's why I'm so delighted at your meeting today to focus on climate change and the many issues and opportunities in front of us. Key areas of focus in CCE that are especially important right now, including the energy transition, finding co-benefits for agrivoltaics, working with communities and local decision makers so we can find win-win solutions and create a robust energy portfolio that preserves farmland, protects the environment, and inspires local economic value of wind and solar and geothermal power. Working across CCE, soil health practices continue to be incredibly important to our farmers as they build resilience into their cropping systems. This includes a focus on carbon sequestration in forests and farmland soil, and practices that empower the co-benefits of healthy soils with a resilient climate future. Work on net zero dairies is also incredibly important. The research that's going on through our regional teams as they educate our dairy community and such important programs as Pro Dairy. This is a great opportunity for the state to lead in realized methane emission reductions and drive circular systems in a sustainable dairy operation future. Finally, supporting communities, people, as they adapt to extreme weather, to create localized food systems, to support nutrition, and community development and youth education. Work that's happening across the state, and especially in our cities, including in urban agriculture, is incredibly important to driving resilience and empowering our local cultures to create a climate smart and adaptive future, not only for today, but for our kids. The challenge of climate is great, so we must be greater. I believe in the power of innovation, teamwork, and collective action. Our superpower is collaboration, and Cornell University, combined with Cornell Cooperative Extension, is unlike any in the world. I'm so grateful for your dedication to climate solutions and wish you a wonderful set of meetings and encourage you to take this challenge on with bold thinking, big ideas, and optimism and hope, because we need that if we're going to chart a pathway forward in a climate resilient future where solutions not only work here in New York State, but radiate around the world.
So now we're gonna transition. We're gonna begin our lightning talk section. So as you can see in your program, there's 4 sections of the lightning talk. Responding to impacts of climate change in New York State, Forests and Farms A, Forests and Farms B, and lastly, but not least, energy and community. So there will be topics, I mentioned this earlier, that there will be topics that are not going to be mentioned today. Some of those topics include oceans and estuaries, wind, rooftop solar, EVs, hard to decarbonize fuels, irrigation, land use planning, biodiversity. There's a few more. There's also important topics that we didn't have time to cover today. We hope that with our next educational gathering that we can highlight all the topics that we missed today. We'd like you to keep in mind that during the lightning talk section, these are just some extremely brief 1-minute introductions to a topic. By having 30 plus of these, we're hoping that everyone can become more aware of the wide breadth of work that's happening across the state and identify a couple projects that relate to your own current work, your own projects that you could then implement in the future. So I'd like to thank you to our wonderful presenters that we have today that all agreed to do this. So I just want to mention that there will not be time for a Q&A during our lightning talks, but there will be opportunities for discussion and networking during intermissions between our lightning talk sections. We encourage that you write your questions down. You'll notice that on your program, the Cornell Net IDs are provided, so you could directly reach out to the speaker. Each speaker has chosen one key resource that they'll share. I think it's oriented in the center of the slides. These are available via QR codes. You'll have access to the slide on the back of the program on a QR code also, so do not worry if you can't catch the QR code while it's up. So now, we're going to jump into the first lightning talk section, which is responding to impacts of climate change in New York State. So when responding to the impacts of climate change, we must understand that climate change has cascading impacts on our social and natural worlds. Climate change can cause extreme heat, which alone may not cause malnutrition. However, extreme heat can cause drought and poor working conditions, which then can cause less food to be cultivated, which then can cause for less food to be shipped, and which then leads to food insecurity, ultimately leading to malnutrition. That's just one of many examples we could use. So this section, we're going to be highlighting work that's done by our Cornell and CCE colleagues to respond to these impacts of climate change. This section will provide resources that can be used and implemented at your own extension to respond to climate change impacts on a local level. Our response must be equitable and just to be sustainable. I'd like to suggest partnering with neighboring counties and communities, sharing some of these resources and ones that you create amongst each other, framing climate change regionally to help implement long-term sustainable actions to combat climate impacts. As communities that are in these same watersheds, in these same bioregions, they deal with a lot of the same impacts. So we have to mobilize together. So with that, let's start our lightning talks.
Hey, they put the meteorologists first to do the lightning talks. So I'm Art Degatano from the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Science, and I think the best way you can remember me in a minute is the data guy. So I run a data center called the Northeast Regional Climate Center. And kind of there, what we do is take this data and don't just give you data, but put this data into tools. So two examples there. The first one is an ag example on how we can use changing climate conditions, current climate conditions to help producers determine when they can best put in cover crops and things like that. So that's a cover crop tool we've worked with as part of climate smart farming. And the bottom is actually a tool that we've been working with some colleagues on to help local communities plan for climate change and their hazard mitigation plans and their vulnerability assessments. So in a very good graphical way, there's kind of the thing on the left under Mad Lib. We call that our Mad Libs, kind of takes text and kind of things you could cut and paste along with graphics into your thing. So I got my 15 seconds. So next.
All right, well, we go from the air and the sky down to the soils because I'm a soils person. I'm Debbie Aller, I'm an extension associate in soil and crop sciences and with the Cornell Soil Health Program. But for the last 2 years, another role I've had is serving as co-chair with Dr. Allison Chatrchyan on the agricultural chapter of the upcoming New York State Climate Impacts Assessment Report. And so this is an update of the 2011 Climate Report for everyone who is familiar with that. Dave Wolf, who's a professor emeritus at Cornell, was the one who led the agricultural chapter. So this is actually focusing on 8 different sectors of the New York State economy, and agriculture only being one of them. And so this is bringing together all the latest science around climate change and all these different sectors, really important to the New York State economy. And so agriculture has been a big component of this. And really the focus of this updated assessment report is the adaptation side of things, not really focusing on the mitigation side, which the climate report did, but adaptation. So these are just some pictures across farms in New York State around adaptation strategies being implemented. So thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Klocker, and I am the Environment and Energy Program Leader at Cornell Cooperative Extension in Dutchess County. And I have the privilege of coordinating a program of CCE Dutchess, Columbia Green, Ulster, Rockland, and Rensselaer counties called the CCE Climate Resilience Partnership. And it is a partnership also with New York State DEC Hudson River Estuary Program and the New York State Water Resource Institute here at Cornell University, with support from the New York State Environmental Protection Fund. And through this collaboration, CCE staff provide technical support to municipalities in the Hudson Valley to complete adaptation actions of the New York State Climate Smart Communities program. So for example, this includes reviewing a municipality's codes, ordinances, and plans, and making recommendations on how they can include more resilience measures in these items. It also includes drafting heat emergency plans with communities, updating a community's emergency preparedness information, and educating their residents about that information, crafting climate resilience visions with communities, and much, much more. And so since 2018, the Climate Resilience Partnership has worked with that many communities. Thanks.
Hello, Andy Turner. Today on New York State 4-H. This is about a really important 2022 4-H national survey of teens that really showed that we need to step it up and get youth more involved with climate change solutions. More than 80% of the youth believe that more action is needed now to address climate change, that they will be forced to make major life decisions such as job choices, career choices, where they live, and even if they want to start a family based on climate realities. However, the good news, 90% are ready to be part of the solution and believe that small actions to improve the environment can have a big impact long term. New York State 4-H has piloted a strong program with teens called Curbing Our Carbon Environment Appetite, which helps youth to understand the science of the carbon cycle, carbon sequestration, and the role of consumers and producers in building a healthy, sustainable food supply. To learn more, contact Dr. Mingla Charonmang. She's our New York State 4-H Health, Wellness, and Food System Specialist. Let's get our youth involved in the solutions to climate change in New York State. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Julika von Stackelberg with CCE Orange, where I am the resilience educator, community educator. I conducted a pilot study during which we used a healing-informed social imaginary as a tool to build resilient communities that regenerate well-being. And the findings that we came up with were threefold. The first one was that individuals need time and space to integrate their understanding and insights around trauma-informed practices, and those also include based or resulting from extraction-based models. The second was that individuals are looking for skill-building opportunities so that they can apply what they're learning. And the third one was to build community at every level, including in the classroom, among their colleagues, and also in our community. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Hoffmann. I'm a professor emeritus in the College of Ag and Life Sciences. I'm going to talk about the power of food. We need a great climate change awakening, especially in the US. You get it, but a lot of people do not get it. How about using the power of food to make climate change relevant to everyone? We eat several times a day, sometimes too many times a day, but it's with us every day. We love it. And the stories we can tell about our favorite foods and our staples are nearly endless. This is what I do. Food is a perfect climate change messenger. A recent survey we did showed that regardless of political affiliation, people are concerned about their climate change impacts on food choices, and they want to learn more. An audience awaits. This is not another doom and gloom story, but one that can empower people to act on climate change. One step you can all start is talk about it. Have a meal with others and talk about what's happening in front of you on your plate. And by saving our favorite foods, maybe we can keep the planet livable.
Hi, I'm Danielle Eiseman. I'm a lecturer in the Brooks School of Public Policy. I teach on the Masters of Public Administration program, and I'm working with a local group of stakeholders as well as my students to explore risk and vulnerability among residents living in manufactured housing communities, as well as outside of those communities and other manufactured housing. What started out as looking at how to improve energy efficiency in manufactured housing has now grown into a much bigger project where we're starting to recognize that the changing climate really affects an already vulnerable group of people. that struggle with affordability, wellness, transportation, higher energy costs in comparison to people living in site-built homes. And so we've started to collect kind of baseline data to really understand the scope of what's happening here. And we're hoping to turn this into a policy tracker in the future, as well as working with residents to improve these issues. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Chatrchyan. So nice to see so many of you that I work with. I want to talk first about the Cornell Climate Stewards program. It's a 12-week curriculum based on Master Gardener Volunteer program that we've developed, and we teach volunteers about climate science impacts, working with local government and working with TeJay. We developed a climate justice module, mitigation and adaptation. We've trained over educators from 14 counties in New York State and 100 volunteers, and we're planning to run this again in 2024. And next slide. 3 projects that I work on related to climate smart agriculture. With our Degatano, we developed the climate smart farming program, and many of the educators are here in the room. That is a great tool for you. The second is a dairy climate adaptation fellowship program that we're running starting in January 2024, recruiting dairy farmers now. And the third, I'm just starting work on a new AI Climate Institute for Climate Smart Agriculture with Johannes Lehman. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm a professor in biological and environmental engineering here at Cornell. We work on technical assessment and solution design for the energy transition. Basically, one of the most relevant examples to you is thinking about what are the vulnerabilities and reliability challenges of the New York State grid under the proposed transition with the CLCPA. Next slide. You can see here in the top left, this is sort of the deployment of the renewables across the state. In this project, what we've done is developed a realistic digital twin of the New York State grid. We built out the CLCPA according to these potential investments and allocations among space. We implement electrification of transportation and buildings. And then what we do is we run it for hourly operations, hour to hour to hour, for over 20 years under different climate and weather futures. And we look to see where potential problems might lie based on technology, based on climate and weather changes, combinations of those, not for the purposes of saying there's problems here and doom and gloom, but to say, okay, if we can identify these potential vulnerabilities and reliability problems, let's start developing solutions now before they become a crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody that just gave those lightning talks. You guys are awesome. So we have these prompts after each talk, and basically what we want to do is to have them start a conversation. So we encourage everyone to talk to people that they haven't met before, as well as friends. So for those on Zoom, we encourage that you add your thoughts on the poll, on the chat, while you're working and brainstorming. There are refreshments still in the foyer, so you're welcome to go do that, use the restroom. But for our first prompt, okay, if you can hear me, clap once. Can you hear me, clap twice? Sweet, I learned that from 4-H. So the first prompt is turn to your neighbor and talk about one thing that you're hopeful for. All right. You can hear me, clap once. You can hear me, yell climate. Woo! All right, we are going to transition to our next lightning talk section. Thank you.
Afternoon, friends. We are going to continue in the same pattern. Each speaker will introduce themselves, but we're switching the topic now to more forests and farms, and it's a hard act to follow, people. That first session was pretty awesome. But we're going to break this one into 2 sections. We'll have another 15-minute break in the middle of the forest and farm section. So I want to kick us off with a little talk from myself. I'm Kitty O'Neill. I'm a field crops and soil specialist up north on the North Country Regional Ag Team with CCE. And I'm an original member of Allison Chatrchyan's Climate Smart Farming Team, along with our timer, Laura McDermott. So I'm going to kick us off. We're going to hear 5 or 6 one-minute talks from our peers about how we're working toward climate resilience across farms and fields
and forests, agroforestry. We'll take a brief break. We'll get another question to think about during the break. And then we'll come back together for another 6 or 7 talks about fields and farms and forests, hearing from our peers about their respective areas of expertise. I wanted to talk to you today about how to do this rather than what I'm doing per se. I'll use myself as an example, but I wanted to talk about how to figure out where you should sort of dig in and get started on doing some of this work yourselves. To me, that's the hardest part. So I wanted to tell you about a couple of ideas. I want to recommend visiting the Cornell Natural and Working Lands website and looking at several of the papers there, but most specifically the 13 strategies paper that Peter Woodbury and Jenny Wightman have written. It's kind of like a to-do list. You can pick something off the list of 13 things and see if it fits, or if it overlaps with your plan of work. In the same way, I would recommend looking at the New York State Ag and Markets Climate Resilient Farms website. That's the QR code in the center here. And look at their RFP for the CRF program and see if that's almost like a to-do list. See if any of that stuff overlaps with your plan of work. And then, so now though comes the hard part. You can pick some stuff off of there that overlaps with your plan of work, but now is the hard part. I picked something off the list. I knew I wanted to contribute to climate resilience for my North Country farms, but you can't just work on climate resilience or climate adaptation or climate mitigation. You have to narrow down your focus. You have to get really specific. You have to really, really focus. So for me, soil health was an obvious overlap with my plan of work, but soil health is still too big. You can't just work on soil health. You have to go even more specific and narrower than that. So I knew on my farms, soil health is a key component of climate resilience. That falls within my plan of work. We need soils to remain in place and continue to function in the face of the weather we know to expect now. Farms need to know how to deal with this. So first thing we need to do is figure out how to measure soil compaction. Well, I wanted to work on soil compaction, one aspect of soil health. You got to be able to measure it well. So we took a stab at a protocol. I began collaborating with Quirin Kettering's Nutrient Management Sphere program to look at the relationship between soil compaction severity and historical yield within a field. Next slide, please. There we go. I'll talk about these results with anyone who's interested. For now, it's just a pretty picture of some cool data. Our measurement protocol worked. We were able to figure out, we found a relationship. While compaction is very serious everywhere, we discovered it is consistently worse in the consistently low yielding areas of a field compared with the consistently high yielding areas of a field. And we've expanded this project now out more in Northern New York, but also into Western New York and Central New York, working together with that lab, a capable lab staff. We have a farm viability grant now, in addition to the original Northern New York Ag Development Program grant. Going forward now, we have this protocol that works to look at relationship between soil compaction and anything we pick, anything we choose. We can look at patterns and figure out strategies from that pattern to mitigate greenhouse gases and find a climate solution. So my last point here is you have to focus down to something specific. You may feel like I'm working on this tiny piece that really I should be doing more, right? But don't worry about it. That is necessary. That's an essential part of how to do this, I think. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sharon Bachman, Ag and Natural Resources Educator with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Erie County. Our tree work is interwoven with climate stewardship, community gardening, food security, and interest in urban food forests. I recently participated in a CCE educator cohort to offer the Cornell Climate Steward training. Since offering the training, I've worked with our 7 new volunteers to support their climate steward projects. Some of them expressed interest in community trees. I've connected them with our existing Community Tree Steward program, started thanks to the interest of one of the Master Gardener volunteers that we trained in 2014. Our resource that we're sharing is our Community Tree Steward resources online in Moodle, thanks to some funding we received from New York State DEC. We look forward to working with Erie County on a current urban forestry initiative that supports food forests and associated workforce development. Guided by principles in permaculture, we value diversity and seek integration and interconnectedness in our extension programming. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rich Stedman. I don't know how I can describe an entire research project in 1 minute, but I'm going to give it a try. And first, I got to embarrass Julie Suarez. She's been calling me out all day. So thank you, Julie, for helping to put together the Climate and Applied Forest Research Institute. Basically, the punchline of this project is, you know how we're going to put solar panels everywhere, and that's going to solve the world's problems? Well, we're also going to grow mature forests everywhere, and that's going to solve the world's problems. And so there are these a lot of estimates about how much land is available for growing mature forests to sequester carbon. Basically, this project is about the idea that those estimates are wildly over-optimistic if we don't have a sense of whether landowners want to play the game. And so basically what we did, we put together a survey of large landowners, St. Lawrence Valley, Southern Tier, and basically looked at their willingness to grow mature forests. Good news, bad news. Good news, at least 2/3 were somewhat willing. Bad news, that's in principle, right? Bad news is when it gets down to the weeds, are you willing to fence? Are you willing to do deer exposures? Are you willing to do all of these other things that are going to be required to do it? It dropped, but the things there, click on it, the whole report, 7 pages.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel Smith. I'm the Cornell Cooperative Extension Agroforestry Educator here in Tompkins County. My work statewide focuses on integrated chestnut and hazelnut agroforestry systems, specifically alley cropping and silvopasture, which are 2 of the 5 defined USDA practices within agroforestry. These 2 practices, however, do not have practice standards within the NRCS here in New York State. CCE, however, does offer support for all 5 practices, including forest farming, riparian forest buffers, windbreaks, with incredible demonstrations like shiitake production, ginseng trials at ARC, and of course, Cornell Small Farms providing tremendous support for agroforestry through education. Next slide, please. We would like to offer more training for service providers, educators, and farmers at every stage to be able to use agroforestry practices so that New York State as a whole can realize multiple benefits across the economic and ecological landscape, and farmers on the ground can experience greater economic stability and increased land health. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mallory Hall, and I'm an urban garden specialist living in Buffalo, go Bills, and I'm working in Erie and Monroe counties. I'm able to compare the urban growing scene in both of those counties, and Buffalo has a pretty robust urban farm scene there with a lot of urban farms and over 100 community gardens, contrasted to what's happening in Monroe County and Rochester, where there's not really any for-profit urban farms there, but more of the community garden happening there. And even though there's different things happening in the 2 cities, they both face the same struggles with policy issues and municipal challenges, and they both have really strong community and nonprofit support.
Hi, I'm Graham Savio. I'm the Ag and Horticulture Issue Leader at CCE Tompkins. My colleagues today have talked about the specific programming we're doing, Gabe and Jenna Durario, and I'd like to just share a couple of the reasons behind our focus on D&I in that work. Next slide, please. Indigenous landholdings have lower rainfall and higher incidence of extreme heat on average, and marginal lands are all at greater risk from climate-driven weather extremes. And in New York, these are often prime sites for afforestation, reforestation, and agroforestry. Gabe's silvopasture work is of service to farmers working with this kind of land. People of color face many barriers to farming, including difficulty accessing ecological agricultural education that would teach climate-resilient farming methods, since internships are often unpaid and so inaccessible to those without generational wealth. And food insecurity, projected to rise due to climate change, is much higher in communities of color. In our community, farmers of color are working to address this by developing innovative financial models to make their food accessible to food insecure families who could not otherwise afford it. Jenna's Payment for Ecosystem Services work is just one example of this kind of work. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peter Woodbury. Glad to see you all here today. So New York State has a mandate, as we've heard, of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And this will require removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, as well as reducing emissions. So growing native trees is a natural and proven way to remove carbon from the atmosphere. We found that there are 1.7 million acres of former agricultural land that might be suitable and potentially available for tree planting. Next slide. Well, some counties have much more land available than others, so find your county here. There's many challenges to reforestation, including the cost, and as Rick Stedman mentioned, landowner preferences as well. The cost, however, is lower than the damages from climate change. So in summary, planting native trees is an important and cost-effective natural climate solution. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna. I'm the Payment for Ecosystem Services educator at CC Tompkins. PES programs can incentivize and reward farmers for environmental benefits that they provide through their land management. So things like carbon sequestration in soils and trees that are integrated into their farms, as well as improved water quality, increased biodiversity, reduced erosion. There are existing programs out there. You may have heard of carbon markets, but they're generally focused on larger farms that are doing field crop operations. And we see that there's a gap where there's limited opportunities for BIPOC and beginning farmers to access these programs. So next slide, please. Here at CC Tompkins, we're working on a pilot program with 6 farmers in the county to better to co-create the pilot and better understand their priorities in long-term programming. Majority of the participants are BIPOC and beginning farmers. Here you can see our volunteers taking soil cores for carbon connecting. Thank you.
That was pretty amazing. We're going to take another short break with a discussion question. What is an area of climate work you hadn't considered before today? Or a new idea or approach that caught your interest that you might be able to implement in your own community? We'll see you back in 15. So we got another round of forests and farms, 3D live TikToks for you. These are other people's jokes. I'm just repeating them at the microphone. So to lead us off, we have Liz Higgins.
I know the after lunch crop insurance talk, everybody's favorite. No, but this is the year, actually. This is the first year I've done work on crop insurance. I'm Elizabeth Higgins. I'm an extension associate with the Eastern New York Commercial Hort Team. And yeah, so I've been doing work on crop insurance for many, many years at Cornell, but most recently with Brad Rickard and Jenny If and some folks at ERS, really looking at uptake of crop insurance with specialty crop farms. We interviewed farms in New York about crop insurance, whether or not they had crop insurance. Most of them were like, no, it's too expensive. No, it doesn't pay anything. And we're like, have you ever tried to look at it? Have you ever like actually figured out how much it costs? And most of them said, no, but I just know it doesn't work. And so yeah, we went and looked, and actually USDA has been improving crop insurance quite a bit. Change the slide. We've looked at a report, we've been comparing, like, sort of, one of the things that's confusing is there's a lot of different policies, but there's a new one I want you all to know. There's whole farm revenue insurance, but now there's the whole farm revenue microinsurance program. That one, the paperwork is easy. Tell your farmer friends and look at the report. And if you have questions, call me. Bye.
My name is Carolyn Marsher. I work with Tony DiTomaso this is what I get for trying to like make it really fast. Tony DiTomaso, Soil and Crop Sciences. We work on weeds, which are a big problem for our farmers, especially with the uptick in herbicide resistant weeds that are making them harder to manage on conventional farms. With climate change, we're expecting to see shorter management windows due to our changing weather conditions. We're also expecting to see changes in our herbicide efficacy due to the various climate factors like increasing carbon dioxide and higher temperatures. And we'll be seeing new weeds coming into the state from the south as the climate warms. And we'll also be seeing changes in competitiveness with our crops. Weed by weed, crop by crop, some better, some worse. So we've done a systematic review of the literature on these topics, and we're trying to synthesize that information for our New York dairy and field crop farmers so that we can support effective weed management into the future in our changing climate.
Hello, everyone.
My name is Khila Pecoraro. I'm the recycling and composting educator at CCE in Schenectady County, which is a teensy little county, but it's highly populated just northwest of Albany. In Schenectady, I run 2 community compost stations, and this year we began collecting food scraps at one of the local elementary schools. And altogether, we've diverted over 20,000 pounds of food waste in just over a year. The diversion is so important because sending our food scraps to landfills breaks them down anaerobically, releasing harmful greenhouse gases like methane, which we've heard about, and composting allows us to eliminate that factor while creating an amazing and useful finished product. Next slide, please. At the school, we're composting to create soil for the school gardens, where the farm to school program will help them grow delicious, healthy food. And at the community compost stations, the finished compost will be fertilizing our on-site urban farm, which is run by local high school students all summer as they learn how to grow healthy food for our community. These skills are introduced and reiterated through our many classes, mine on various methods of composting, and my colleagues' seed to supper classes, showing our community that we all have the skills to recycle resources, save money, help the planet, feed ourselves and each other. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Casey Deemer. I'm the communications manager for the Cornell Small Farms program. As we all know, the majority of farms in New York are small and they are on the front line of climate change impact. One extreme event could wipe them out. These farmers are working to maintain their farm's productivity and income while serving as stewards, all with fewer resources and higher investments. So not only are these farmers inherently interested in climate resilience, they're already innovative in putting practices into place that's based on their own experiences, generational wisdom, and cultural traditions. We're working specifically with historically excluded groups such as Latina farmers, veteran farmers, and building relationships with other diverse communities to listen and learn from the knowledge they hold and the challenges that they're facing. As part of our role in the Climate Smart Commodities grant that you all heard about from Julie, we are working to promote adaptation and resilience practices that farmers are able to apply at scale. This is going to include pathways to financial compensation, which needs to be farmer-informed, equitable, and accessible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim McFadden. I'm a dairy cattle nutritionist and professor here in the Department of Animal Science. My work focuses on livestock methane, and so we sort of have two key categories. One is to enhance the efficiency of milk production in developing countries. But here in America, we're really focused on developing safe and effective technologies that reduce enteric methane emissions from cattle. And that involves feed additives, vaccines, lytic enzymes that target the methanogens that require a very extensive commitment to do the clinical trials required for FDA approval of these compounds. And then second, we're also thinking about monitoring. One thing to ask farmers to develop, to use technologies that are safe and effective, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure we can monitor how those technologies work on individual farms. And so there'll be a very concerted effort to focus on how do you predict or monitor those emissions on individual cow level, which will include various wearable technologies. So the things that we're doing here at Cornell is to upscale our infrastructure, our research capabilities, faculty, and equipment to be able to do this at the scale that is required. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Barkley. I'm the Livestock and Beginning Farm Specialist with the Southwest New York Dairy Livestock and Field Crops Program. I'm working with a team of educators across the state with another team of 35 broiler meat bird producers across the state to determine their efficiencies of production and whether or not their broiler enterprises are economically viable. Next slide, please. One of the unanticipated consequences that we've run into, in part due to climate change, is more extreme weather events. And as part of these more extreme weather events, we're seeing higher condemnations of the birds, slower growth rates, and essentially higher death rates among flocks, making them less profitable for farmers going forward. Because these birds are keystone species for many farms, it's very important for us to make sure that these birds grow well. And we're taking the information learned from this study to provide producers across the state with information on how to grow birds most effectively. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bobby Severson, and I'm an Extension Associate and Director of the Cooperative Enterprise Program in the Dyson School. I'm just going to speak a little bit about the cooperative opportunities for grazing sheep beneath utility scale solar arrays. Next slide. At the suggestion of the American Solar Grazing Association and through funding with USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, a survey was developed, launched, and completed by 400 farmers to examine the need for a farmer-owned organization, such as a co-op, to provide services to overcome barriers to sheep grazing under solar arrays. Particular focus was on the needs of 50 farmers, our A-Star farmers presently grazing under solar arrays and 229 bee farmers, which was almost 60%, with sheep and are interested in grazing under arrays. We found there is a need for such an organization with initial focus to negotiate contracts and provide insurance. With anticipated increased number of sheep, there is also a need for additional marketing, slaughter, and processing facilities. And with that, next slide. We've got some resources that we're putting up that include a resource guide and a spreadsheet.
Hey everybody, my name is David Kay. I was on the Stellar organizing committee. I also want to call out Jenna in particular for leading us. I think she deserves a round of applause. We really held everything together. So we're going to go into a discussion session now. I see you. I'm checking with her to make sure I don't screw it up. And the usual story, 15 minutes basically. We'll come back and we'll have our last round of lightning talks. And I'll reintroduce myself now. That's it. What is one way you could build on your current specialty to help your clients contribute to the New York State climate smart goals, which we've been hearing about it from a number of people. And again, like, you know, I think it's obvious what we're trying to do here, trying to get people to think how you can integrate all of this into your own work. That's the point of almost all of this. So please go ahead, and I hope you find somebody to talk to or some thoughts that really inspire you and give you some little more concrete vision of how you will move forward with this work individually and together with colleagues. Thank you. I know it's not like we always save the best for last, and we're certainly not doing that today. I'm talking about the audience members as well as our speakers. We're not saving the best for last, but we are saving some really great presentations to wrap things up. I'm going to just briefly introduce myself again with a little bit more. David Kay. I'm the Department Extension Leader in the Department of Global Development. I'm going to ask you all a question here. How many of you have climate somewhere in your titles, your job titles, or your work plan descriptions? Actually, that's pretty good. Let's give a round of applause for those folks. How many of you who don't have that work on climate stuff? Let's have a hand for those folks. Now let me ask, how many of you have heard of the National Extension Climate Initiative? Great. I'm going to encourage all of those who raised your hands, who I'm going to just assume by default are members, which just means signing up on our mailing list, even though it may not be true. And encourage everybody else to check it out. This is like your peers across the spectrum of extension, working on everything that they define as having something to do with climate, trying to up the potential of our entire land-grant university system to work on climate more effectively, seeking resources, sharing information. So I encourage you to check that out. I'm bringing that because I am chair, and our absolutely fabulous keynote speaker over here, Jenny Wightman, is one of our committee chairpersons, so on the curriculum committee. So, and Cornell and New York are already well represented, as you may have seen, but we would love to have everybody at least aware of what we're doing. Last thing, I'm just going to say a little bit more kind of along the lines of what the other folks coming after me will do is I just want to mention, it was mentioned in an earlier session, that if we get funding from DOE, this is something I'm personally involved in, we will have an incredible opportunity in collaboration with NYSERDA formally and with a whole bunch of other statewide organizations who are also very interested in trying to have extension in the forefront of helping communities plan for and accommodate the amount of large-scale renewables, which in New York really means solar for the most part, more effectively. We would have sort of a whole siting project that would get going. And they're explicitly hoping that DOE is hoping that, and they asked for extension to be in the lead in applying for this money. So New York may or may not be one of the lucky ones, but more to come on that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack, and also mention that we do have a mystery presenter. So your job is going to be trying to guess who is listed up on the previous slide, which you can't even see anymore, and compare them to who is actually presented.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Wright. I am the powerhouse educator here at CCE Tompkins as part of the energy and climate change team. Next slide, please. The powerhouse is a tiny home that was built with energy efficiency in mind. And we use this as a mobile educational resource, specifically for youth education. So we'll do programs with folks in grades K through 12 and do hands-on exhibits to help folks understand more about how we use energy. So there's three main things that we try to instill in our lessons, especially for younger kids. It's just understanding what uses energy in our home, and then of course how we can use less of it. Second is to understand where that energy comes from, and finally to understand how energy and our energy use impacts the climate. So if you or someone you know is interested in talking more about youth education, especially around climate, please feel free to email me or catch me after the talks. Thanks.
It's not a lack of information or climate change denial that holds people back. It's often a sense of confusion, discouragement at the enormity of the challenge, and a feeling of, what can I as one person do? To counter this despair and hopelessness, we need to create connection and belonging. Be the catalyst for a group of people. Find people where they already are, where they already have connections, and start a movement. What works? When we are in the company of others taking action, getting support, feeling community, doing it together, that works. Work with spiritual organizations, with neighborhoods, with nonprofits, with knitting clubs, with soccer teams, whatever. The main thing is to strengthen and maintain the personal connections to start climate conversations, to get climate actions going, to spread the energy and the ideas. Reach far more people this way. Move them to concern and action. Go forth and multiply. You don't have to have any special skills to start doing this tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Jackie Spencer, Community and Economic Vitality from CCE Chemung, and my coworker, Tony Gardner, in Natural Resources. And we're just highlighting a workshop series that we worked on together, Clear the Clutter. So, community need that came to us was a need for folks to have information on keeping their home environments maintained well. And so we launched this 4-session workshop for adults, exploring personal preferences around organizational, prioritizing needs, letting go of possessions, and making a plan. And the audience had a strong desire to reduce, reuse, recycle, and keep things from going into landfills. So we brought in Tony for one of our sessions, and she'll talk about that. I will be offering a CCE educator session this winter for folks that might want to replicate the series. And the participant feedback was overwhelmingly positive, especially emphasizing the inclusion of the household management resources.
Right, thank you, Jackie. So we were talking about the hazardous waste, and that was my focus when I went into the group, but that it is a clutter class. So we talked a lot about clutter throughout the home. People do have a lot of clutter in their garage. I'm sure that all of you do. It creeps up on us. Before you even know it, you have a whole bunch of something. Most homes are filled with belongings that you no longer have a need for. And how did I relate this to climate? I let them know that, decluttering can be bad for the environment if you don't take the time and care to consider where your items will end up.
Hello, I'm not Gabriel Dirty, I'm your surprise guest. So Gabriel's having a medical emergency right now, but he should be fine. So I am Guillaume Mometz. I am Gabriel's, supervisor through this program, Ag Energy NY, which is an ISERTA program, statewide, looking at energy use on farms. And it covers all farm sectors except for dairy and greenhouses, which are covered by other programs. And essentially it provides education and resources for CCE educators who then work with their communities and their farmers in their counties, as well as some of the area ag teams. We also just got some foundation money separate from NYSERDA to do additional work that Gabriel's taking on in terms of some of the incentives and rebates that are available, so he can help folks actually access the money to do the energy upgrades. And also we're going to hire a full-time person to do ag and solar work. So helping farmers understand the whole ag solar landscape. So that's exciting. And that'll be coming up statewide. We have brochures on the program, and that's the website essentially. And I'll put these on the back table. Thanks.
Kareem Beer is director of the Southern Tier Regional Clean Energy Hub out of Popular Extension, Tompkins County. So you've heard about NYSERDA, or State Energy Agency, and you've heard about the CLCPA, or State Energy Act. And in the coming decades, billions of dollars are going to be invested in clean energy. And the act says that at least 35% of benefits should go to disadvantaged communities. And how is that going to happen? Well, this isn't the total answer, but part of that is that the regional hubs were created by NYSERDA to serve disadvantaged communities, providing resources on clean energy use, reducing energy, and accessing clean energy jobs. Next slide. There are 12 hubs in 10 regions. 7 have CCE involvement with dozens of associations, and 4 of the hubs are led by CCE. So there are educators in almost each county of our region looking to collaborate with other educators and programs to reach this population and help make people's homes cleaner, safer, and greener. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our lightning talk speakers today. Can we have a final round of applause for everyone? We truly appreciate your willingness to take on the challenge of a 1-minute presentation. We know it wasn't easy, but we appreciate your patience with us and your energy and all of the information and resources that you shared today. As we move into the final portion of our afternoon, I would like to welcome up Jenny Kao-Kniffin, Interim Director of CCE and Associate Professor in the School of Integrated Plant Science, for some concluding remarks before we move into a final discussion portion.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Jenna, for really leading this on. I'll have to say that, so Jenna said, can you just talk about why we're doing this so that everyone knows the context? So the context goes way, way back, but I'll just say in the most recent time, it was 1 year ago, we had the agriculture in service. You know, we were still in this kind of a hybrid phase, COVID-19, part virtual and part in person. So the virtual part of it was on a Monday, and the focus was on climate and energy. And so Ben Houlton was our keynote speaker for that. And then we had these 2 amazing brand new climate resiliency specialists, Jenna and Zach. Well, Zach moved to Oregon. I'm really happy to see we have a new, Savannah Shelnut, everyone knows you. And so that's very exciting, and we're hoping more to come very, very soon. And so in this phenomenal, what you and Zach created was this amazing follow-up after Ben Houlton. And we gave Ben Houlton a little bit of the summary of what happened, and he was so excited. So we spoke with Ben Furness, and Ben Houlton was very excited that, you know, compared to other universities with these really large climate types of programs, you know, this would be a unique one because of the extension program. Many of those other universities like Stanford don't have a statewide extension program. So this is quite unique to Cornell, and it carries on this legacy. So again, as we're concluding, Jenna, thank you. Jenny Wightman, that I got to see in person. It was really exciting to see her in person. Kitty O'Neill, right there. And David Kay, Nancy Glazier, Laura McDermott, Antonius Test Jr., and Kathy Bunting-Howard, Savannah Shelnut, and Sarah Muzio, are all part of the initial Climate Symposium organizing committee. Now the original idea came from the ground up. So I'll have to say that Chris Watkins, who was our director of Cornell Cooperative Extension from 2014 up until just recently, July 2023, he really wanted this to happen. The climate specialist, climate resiliency specialist, he had a vision for just having so many more of this all across the state. The expansion of the regional ag teams. And the whole purpose was that so many, and I mentioned the organizers, so many have this climate focus. It wasn't forced upon. It was voluntary. It was voluntary, and it was because everyone, the ag specialists and Harvest New York as well, their job is to connect to the stakeholders, the communities. And this is what they felt the need is all across the state. And nothing has ever been forced. And so it's always been ground up, bottom up. And that was the way Chris Watkins led. We have a new director coming December 1st. Andy Turner, can you stand up again in case people missed it for your lightning talk? So Andy was one of the first speakers for the lightning talk. And so that's a good sign. So that tells you that it carries on this interest in having a director that really cares about climate and energy. And so with that, it's really Andy's, Andy gets all the wonderful opportunities to work with everybody and how do we have that vision for the future. And so another important part is, Julie Suarez, who was our speaker, our keynote speaker, has done some amazing work. We always know Julie for County Law 224 funding in January, but I hope you were delighted to see that leadership and pioneering aspect of Julie. And so Julie has already left the building, I believe, and so hasn't heard this part of it. And then also, just to note, we had Mike Hoffmann here and also Allison Chatrchyan that was here. And so many of you may have known many years back that they pioneered a lot of this climate smart farming and also got to work with Abe on continuing to do this work on climate stewards. So this is where I just want to leave just to say that a lot of this work was happening. A lot of this, I was telling Jenna, it was a lot of Chris Watkins wanting us to just continue on in this. Now we have Andy Turner to continue on this role, and we have more to come. Keith Tidwell helped with some of these remarks, but I will know that there's a lot of pressure, and David Kay can continue on with the pressure of how do we have this at the leadership level in CCE administration. So there's more to come very, very quickly. But it's not my place to reveal how that will happen, but it's always going to be from the ground up. And it's always going to be, from what the ag specialists, ag educators around the state are interested in and already doing. So thank you everyone for being here, contributing to the lightning talks and being interested. And maybe we'll actually have a climate summit very soon. Thank you.
All right. Sure, everyone's starting to get fatigued, so we are nearing the end. We have one last prompt. Before that, I just wanted to have you all give yourselves a round of applause for being here. It takes motivated educators to actually make a difference, to actually change community and create community. So I also wanted to, again, thank the committee, thank all the speakers today. Jenny and Jenna, I was just talking with Savannah, and Jenna doesn't give herself enough credit for things, so thank you again, Jenna. Really spearheaded the whole thing and gave me a chance to actually be up here. So our last prompt it's somewhat personal, but also relating right back to everything why we're here. So what do you need individually, organizationally, and in your community to further your climate work? We all have our own niche and what we like to do, what we want to do. And so what do you need? This is your chance to share your thoughts. We have some prompt cards and some pens available for you to write down your responses. They're being handed out. Committee members will be collecting these around the room and in the box at the back. So please feel free to work together to brainstorm and discuss this. And then we will have 15 minutes of that, and then we will regroup for closing remarks. So thank you all again.
Just some final announcements for everybody heads out the door. So to continue the momentum of today, if you're interested in joining with other colleagues to continue discussions, one option is the Agriculture and Climate Change Program Work Team, or another of the program work teams out of Cornell. Can you hear me? So on the back of the program, you can see the QR code on the top will take you to the website where you can join those program work teams. And then finally, as you're leaving today or afterwards, we'll send this in a follow-up email. You can take our survey that we have here. It's very short, I promise. Just to give us feedback on today's event and any future events, what you would like to see. And thank you again to everyone for coming today.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.